What does this house have to do with the U.S. Constitution? To our eyes, it's an old house. But when 14-year-old Tommy Wilson lived here, it was new, a physical representation of Reconstruction. After the Civil War, the United States and the South had to rebuild and reunite as one nation. The Constitution itself received 3 amendments. The 13th, which outlawed slavery, the 14th, which promised all Americans, including African Americans, equal protection of the law, and the 15th, which gave African American men the right to vote. These amendments weren't just laws recorded on documents in Washington, D.C. They changed how the Wilsons and other families lived day to day. This house had a staff, most likely African American. The people cooking Tommy's meals and washing his laundry were no longer slaves. Because of the 13th Amendment, other African Americans were paid for their work and lived as free members of the community. But rights and respect spelled out in the Constitution weren't always delivered. Attitudes can be harder to change than law. Groups like the KKK and the Red Shirts terrorized African Americans and others who didn't share their views. The 14th Amendment, which guaranteed equal protection, became a justification for the Jim Crow era and separate but equal policies that kept black citizens in a world apart. It would be almost a century before the U.S. would move past segregation. And while the 15th Amendment gave African American men a voice in politics, it would be another 50 years before women, black or white, could vote. As a teenager, Wilson saw black men gain the right to vote. But when 14-year-old Tommy Wilson lived in this house, where his mother was bringing up the future president and telling him to do his homework, she was never permitted to vote in a presidential election. It wasn't until 1920, as president, that Wilson signed the 19th Amendment, extending voting rights to women. Even today, the amendments of Reconstruction are part of our national debate, and has brought us back to the 14th Amendment and differing views of what equal protection under the law should mean. Like Tommy Wilson, we live in a world where change can seem both to take forever and practically happen overnight. Like Wilson, we live in a country where the U.S. Constitution's meaning is still being debated, and where questions of equality and freedom are important issues today, just as they were then.